Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. Today, our guest truly needs no introduction. He is the clinical trials guru, Dan Sfera. In this episode, we discuss his entry into clinical research, our shared affinity for Gary Vaynerchuk, learning to pivot, hiring for potential versus hiring for experience, and the importance of becoming a generalist. So without further ado, Dan Sfera. All right, Dan Sfera, thank you so much for coming on. How you doing out there in California?
Very good, Brad. How about yourself?
Not too shabby. I imagine it's a little more chill here in Oklahoma City than it is out there on the West Coast right now.
Yeah, it's pretty eventful with everything. I mean, at the time of this recording, June 2nd, we've got the protests now overtaking the coronavirus, and the economy was just starting to open back up. So yeah, it's pretty eventful here, but I expect things to get back to normal pretty soon.
Well, very good. Well, I think pretty much at this point, I imagine anyone listening is well familiar with your content. You're a prolific, if nothing else. You put a ton of stuff out there. So, I'm really kind of interested to hear. I want to hear your story a little bit about how you first got into clinical research, and then maybe a little bit about what's really spurred you to, start creating content at the level that you do.
Wow, okay. Well, did not know the interview would go there, but that's good because I don't really talk about it that often. I did in the beginning, like when I did my bio when I first started the YouTube, just so people kind of had an idea of like the context behind why I'm doing what I'm doing. But yeah, basically, let's see, when did it start? Uh, First year of college, I was doing pre-med. And then I switched to, no, no, I take it back. I was doing pre-pharmacy, and then I switched to pre-med. And my dad at the same time, my dad's a psychiatrist. So my dad got involved with clinical research through some colleagues because he was always into private practice and making hospital rounds. He became a licensed physician when I was 16. Uh, Prior to that, we immigrated from Romania, so he was working to try to pass the ECFMG and all that stuff. So by the time he became a licensed psychiatrist, I was already a sophomore in high school, and pretty soon I went to college. When I was in college, I was doing the pre-med thing, and he got involved with these doctors who were doing clinical trials. So every summer when I would come back home from college, I went to University of Arizona. So when I would come back home to Southern California, I would take a few days out of the week, go to the office where he's working, and just kind of hang out. I used to answer phones. I used to refill prescriptions, just helping out in the family business. And then clinical research started, like he started actually getting busier with the research. They were easy studies. They were doing like these observational studies, quality of life survey studies for patients. So it was not the typical clinical trial, but it was good. It like opened my eyes to the world of research.
Sure.
And to me, the reason I did it was because I wanted it to look good on my resume for med school because I knew my grades were not good enough to probably get in, which it turned out it was accurate. And the research experience didn't help me get in med school either, but it
Sure.
opened my eyes. So I said, you know what? The next thing I wanted to do was CRA. When I graduated college and I knew I had like no prayer of getting into med school, CRA, because I kept interacting with monitors that would show up to my dad's office. And so started applying to CRA jobs. No responses. I mean, I have so much empathy with the students who do our CRA academy. Um, I probably sent out hundreds of applications and zero responses, Brad. Not even
Sure.
like we're not interested, just nothing. And I was like, you know what? I mean, I'm just gonna learn the business. I'm gonna learn the process here. So Turns out these people my dad partnered with, and this is something I learned a lot more as an adult, and I'm sure you have as well, is clinical research is not for every physician. Like a lot of these doctors who partnered with my dad, they expected quick results, quick money, doing research, and when they realized that wasn't going to happen, they all left. So it was just my dad with the clinical research, and he told me, "Hey, I don't really want to do this. I want to just focus on my private practice. So if you want to do the clinical research, you find another doctor to be your PI. I'm willing to do it for a year if you want to do this, but then you find another PI, or we just shut down, the research and you go and find a job." And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And I'm really glad I did. Really glad I did. I mean, it turns out those doctors left at the worst time possible. And this is why I always say in my videos, I mean, all the stuff I say in my videos is really based on like those first 5 years. Those doctors left at the absolute worst time. They left right before the money started coming in.
Right.
And this is when my dad basically gave me the entire business because he thought it wasn't worth anything either. And I didn't know. I mean, I was just, I got lucky. So checks started coming in, and I was like, wow, these other doctors must be super rich. They're just walking away from this. So, started making good money doing the research, had to learn the ins and outs, everything, coordinating, finding, I had to go look for doctors. And then I realized that they had a lot of unpaid obligations, namely hospital bills. And
Sure.
so all that money that I made in that first year, like 80% of it had to go back to paying these hospital bills, which wasn't even aware of. So I'm glad I didn't spend that money. And then it basically
Sure.
was starting over from ground zero. And, started learning little bits and pieces here. What's a coordinator? How do you hire coordinators? How to get PIs? I mean, all the stuff I talk about to this day. I had to, and I really had to struggle. I mean, it was like monitors would ask me things, I would have no idea what they're talking about, and there was literally no one else there. It was my
Right.
dad who knew even less than me, and me. And so, yeah, Google was my friend, and this was before YouTube. And it always stuck in the back of my mind, if this industry is that big, I can't be the only one looking for this kind of information. And there was really nothing out there other than paid stuff from CenterWatch and the kind of books that they sell that's not really helpful but very expensive. So
Right.
that kind of stuff. I mean, nothing against CenterWatch. They have a decent business, but back then that was like the only player uh, in town,
Sure.
and it wasn't very helpful. So yeah, I had to learn it all like just through trial and error.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty universal experience. Is you talk to more coordinators, so I think again that goes a lot of that goes back even for me is checking out your content because I was in the same boat. I started at a university, but nobody there either A knew what they were doing or B cared to actually show me how things were done. So just the fact that one dude was out there trying to educate people made all the difference, not just for me, but I imagine hundreds of other site level people. So I owe a lot of where I'm at and what I do to the content you've created over the years. So it's interesting to me to hear kind of how the story that got you to that place. So again, I think that's awesome, and I thank you. I thank you
Thank
for
you,
that.
man. That means a lot. I mean, and just to give people context, so all these struggles, when I graduated college in 2004 and then literally took over in '05. I didn't make my first video until 2010. And it was
Sure.
only after I read Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, I've
And
always wondered. I've always got a very Gary Vaynerchuk vibe from you, so that's actually it's very validating for me to hear you mention that because I'm a big fan of his as well. So that's
yeah,
just on a side note. On a side note, I'm glad that I caught on to that a little bit.
yeah, definitely was, especially in the early days. Not so much anymore, but in the early days, I
Sure.
was definitely a disciple. And but yeah, 5 years, and that's where the seeds were planted. Like, hey, all these things I struggled with, I don't know how I'm gonna monetize it, but if I create videos, and initially it was to create videos to get patients, right? Like, I wanted, like, my first YouTube video was a what is clinical research video.
Sure.
And it's a horrible video. I deleted it. I'm so mad I deleted it because I should have kept it. But like it was so
Right.
embarrassing, I got rid of it like 5 years ago. But basically, I was trying to educate patients like, hey, this is what clinical research is. My next video was like, what is an IRB? What is an informed consent? And what I realized, Brad, was like I was trying to get patients for my site, and then I was thinking that I can build a business to be like a nationwide patient recruiter. Because when I read Crush It, that's what I saw. Okay, if I
Sure.
do this like Gary says, I'm going to be able to get patients interested in research, and then I'm going to be a billionaire because there's a huge issue, then there still is, with patient recruitment. And
Yeah,
it turns out
absolutely.
the only people watching were other researchers. So that's when I pivoted, and that's when all my trial and error things that all those seeds that were planted came back, and I said, look, there's obviously demand here for researchers, which is actually easier to make content for them. And the patient thing, no one's done it yet to this day. I mean, that's a
Right.
huge
Right.
opportunity.
Yeah, but that's the beauty in your story too, though, is that you were able to recognize, where and when to pivot. And, it's like they say, if you quicker you fail, the better off you are. And it sounds like, from wanting to go to med school to wanting to be a CRA to instead running a site to creating content for patients to pivoting to creating content for sites, you've pivoted a lot along the way.
Yes, tons, man. And I mean, I've been extremely lucky in a lot of facets of my life. I mean, extremely lucky. I had parents, immigrant parents, who pushed me to go to college, because if it was up to me, I probably would not have gone on my own. I thank God we did not have Uber when I was in college, because I would have probably dropped out and just worked full time as an Uber driver. Uh,
Sure.
and then the fact that my dad literally handed me over a business. I mean, it was a failing business. Nobody knew what they were doing, but it was still like the infrastructure for a research site, which is now like the foundation for my career. So just extremely lucky, man. Like really, I don't think that I did this. Yes, there were a lot of pivots, but luck is like had such a big part in this.
Sure. Well, and being able to recognize the value in those things, even being handed a failing practice, is you were able to identify the value and learn your lessons, cut your teeth, and turn that into something successful for you down the road.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you know what? The more I think of it now that you're asking and I'm having to reflect back, because I really don't think about this stuff that often, but like reflecting back, I made so many decisions like just impulsively. And, like, okay, let's not do med school. Let's go work for my dad. And by the way, I did not want to work for my dad, but I saw that as the
Sure.
quickest way to get to med school. And then I saw that as the quickest way to be a CRA. I mean, all those decisions were somewhat impulsive. I did not really think much about it. I just did it. So a lot of my career has been just reacting rather than being proactive. And only like in my mid 30s, and now I'm 38, am I actually getting strategic about my decisions. It was not that it was all reactive probably until like 4 years ago.
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of that goes back to a Patreon post that you did recently. Like, you sometimes just get out of your own way, and I find I suffer from paralysis analysis. I overthink and overthink before I finally just say, you know what, just do the damn thing. So sometimes there's value in that too. Just
I think
action, because
so.
everyone I talk to has an idea. Everyone's got an idea. How many people actually follow through on that idea? It's a you know disturbingly small amount.
Right.
So I think there's even a lot to be said for what you might call impulsive is just action. Get out there and
Just
get out
do
there and
it.
do it. And then you know what? If it doesn't work, what do? Pivot. You know, learn
Right.
from it and turn it into something of value. So that's yeah, very interesting. I've always wondered. Again, I've listened to a lot of your content throughout the years, so I'm excited to hear more about sort of your beginnings, and I think a lot of people are sort of interested hearing about that. So it's very, very cool. How involved are you now, like with the sites that you work with?
So that's a good question. I'm purposely, going back to now being more proactive about my strategies and decisions, and I'm no longer reacting. I'm reacting to some extent, but I'm like the majority of my decisions now are not reactive. Um, I'm purposefully delegating as much as I can from my day to day to staff. So like Monica right now, Monica and Chris are like my right hand man and woman. Well, I guess one is on the right, one is on the left. Uh,
Sure.
there's also a bunch of other people that help that don't really come on camera. Those are the two that are willing to come on camera every now and then. So really our biggest thing right now is the site network that we have. So helping other sites get more studies, helping other investigators or business owners start their own sites. I almost do nothing with the sites that we actually own. And
Sure.
that is good and bad because I know that if I focused more on that, that would be extremely successful. Um, but then I kind of like having multiple things going on. And I think that's, going back to my reactive days. We're just seeing what the market gives and say, okay, let's go with that. And then let's do this as well.
Right.
So I'm involved in the business development. I'm involved in like with the site networks, bringing on new clients, obviously with the CRA and CRC Academy, bringing on new students. I'm not involved in the operations of those things, but I am involved in adding new features, adding new services, and then same thing with the CRO. If I were actually involved in any of our businesses, in the actual operations, it would probably be with the CRO that we have, where I'm actually doing the monitoring and the lead monitoring and the regular monitoring and pretty much everything. So the
Sure.
CRO reminds me of my site when I first started back in '05. It's just a different kind of learning, but it's kind of the same pathway we're taking. So yeah, like probably I'm more involved in the actual CRO and maybe the site network stuff.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, interesting. So, throughout all this in your career, I mean, what would you consider, some of the best practices you've picked up, and maybe with an eye towards site level work? I mean, is there something specifically you'd share with other site level employees that you really consider a best practice, or something that kind of helped you get over the hurdle?
Site level employees. Hmm. I guess I'll take it to the site level ownership and management.
Sure, that works.
And then I'll do the employees. But I guess for the owners slash management, it's a numbers game. I mean, everything is a numbers game. Never settle for just one PI. Never settle for just one study or one sponsor that's feeding you studies and or one indication of studies that you're doing. So I think doing more when you can is best. And don't rest on your laurels because I still do that to this day with the sites. I told you I'm not that involved. And sometimes I have to get involved because now all of a sudden we need a study. And so then I have to get back involved in that. So if you have a system that's constantly looking for studies, looking for doctors, looking for patients, looking for staff, building the brand for the site, I think that's the biggest advice I give to the site owners and managers. And also, like for the managers, and this relates to the employees, it's hard to find really good coordinators. So when you find one, I mean, I like to hire for potential. I typically don't hire a coordinator that has worked as a coordinator somewhere else.
Yeah.
I hire for potential because a lot of these coordinators come with bad habits from their other sites, and then you start getting into arguments. Well, this is how we did it there, and then I tell them, well, this is not how we do it here, and it's my business, So you either go start your own site and do it how you want it, or if you're gonna want to work for me, this is how we're gonna do it. So having the potential and grooming them how to how you want them to become is one thing, but then you got to keep them, because as soon
Yeah,
as you train these guys, now they become even more valuable in the marketplace. So now the trick is keeping them. And one of the things I think I've been able to do relatively well is keeping them, so employee retention, without necessarily breaking the bank. Like, we don't overpay our staff. We're probably fair. Um, maybe like high side of fair, but not really. Let's just say we're like
sure.
average with that. So the way I've been able to keep them is giving them other opportunities, like figuring out exactly what they want to accomplish, even if it means starting a competing site. Uh, just be honest with me up front, and it takes like a good year to get them to actually see that you mean it, and you're not just telling them this so that they tell you their secrets. But once they
Right.
tell the truth, hey, I want to be a CRA, I want to be a site owner, or sometimes the truth is I don't know what I want to do, but I don't mind being exposed to the opportunities you have. That's been my selling point. So find your selling point. If you're the site, everybody has one, and it doesn't always have to be like overpaying the staff to keep them. It's just, I think the little things actually add up into big things.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more on both points. So first of all, I think there's way too much of an emphasis on where can I find, super experienced coordinators, because I tend to agree with you that a lot of times you don't want them bringing those habits over. I'd rather find people with the good soft skills that can be trained. If you can invest a little bit of time into these people, I think they're going to be better coordinators for you at the end of the day. And then secondly, there's a lot of things you can offer your coordinators. Look, being a coordinator is not like working on a factory line. You can offer flexible hours. We don't even have PTO. If you need time off, as long as your work's done and there's no patients to see, do what you need to do. I mean, you can offer a lot of get creative,
Yeah,
aside from just compensation.
same,
Uh,
same.
and
We
and
do
those
the
are
same.
things that you're not going to get in an academic institution where research takes place, and you may not even find across a lot of other independent research sites. So there's ways to get
Yes.
creative and to really borrow from other industries that again, I just feel like research lacks far behind what other industries are doing to be creative. So we can start implementing those things, and it can have a big impact on recruitment and retention of employees.
Yeah, I agree. We do exactly the same thing. I mean, I don't care what, we don't have hours, it's salary. And then we do bonuses too. And it's like, hey, if you don't want to come
Right.
in today, you don't even need to tell me. It took like 5 years for Monica to stop telling me she can't come in on a certain day. I told her, I
Right.
don't care, don't tell me this. Like,
Well,
and
so many
so,
people I think are used to the clock watcher, and I've seen that across other research sites I've worked at or been in, is that be in your office from 8 to 5. Well, that doesn't do you any good. It's not generating revenue for you to sit on your ass in your office.
right,
So
right.
if you're not, then do something productive, or don't just sit there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're
Mm-hmm.
here for. So yeah, I think there's again a lot of creative ways to help retain good help, especially if you treat your employees right.
Absolutely. And if you train and to give some advice to the employees or to the management, if you train as generalist, right? Like, you can provide value in more ways than one. And this is an advantage for the employee, because you'll now like, if you truly get involved in seeing the pain points of the industry, which is inevitably what you're going to see if you become a generalist, you're going to see the opportunities, and maybe you're going to either create new streams of revenue potentially for your site, or maybe for yourself. Maybe you don't like the site you're at, so for yourself. So I really think like generalist is the future. Like, specializing is great because everyone starts out as a specialist, but I think the goal for everybody should be to be more of a generalist.
Well, and I think that I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's what enables people like us to do what we do. I mean, if we weren't generalists, you can't go start your own site network. If all you know how to do is see patients, how could you possibly know how to negotiate a budget and a contract, how to, complete the regulatory process, how to do all the things that are involved? So you create all kinds of value for yourself. But I mean, to go back, a lot of that goes back to the company culture that you're in, because I've worked in places where they do keep everything very siloed. So that can be frustrating and tricky for employees who are stuck in those situations.
Yeah, and that's exactly why at those places they have the highest retention issues when it comes to their staff. I mean, I'm monitoring a big AMC right now, and it's like every 3 months there's a new coordinator because the old one's going somewhere else.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. So it's got to be a good match. So yeah, if you're a coordinator stuck in one of those places, then get out of there as quick as you can.
Right.
Or use the opportunity to learn, and then take that with you.
That's right.
Well, very good. So what are some, tools and resources you use? I will say that I've already plugged your book once on one of our podcasts, so you can't use that one. But what are some tools or resources you use, in your everyday?
Tool. Okay, so let's see here. I used to be a big Evernote fan.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've refused to upgrade because I've been doing so much with the free version. I don't see a reason to do it.
Sure.
I've been using Dropbox and this thing called Intralinks, it used to be a research thing, but now it's more of a financial services platform. That's more of a virtual workspace. Our sites are starting to use Creo, and
nice.
I imagine with this next round of new studies starting up after the pandemic, we're going to be using a lot more eSource. So Creo is an eSource platform.
Yeah, so I'd really like to hear your feedback on that. We use Creo as well, but we've not really cracked into the eSource part quite yet.
Oh, okay.
So I'd be real curious to hear what your experiences are once you go down that road.
So I've only used it for one study so far. And unfortunately, it was a study where we had 20 screen failures and no randomizations.
Yeah.
Actually, we were gonna have a randomization, and we were starting to figure it out, and the sponsor didn't want us to screen anymore. So I didn't actually randomize anyone on it, but very simple to use. I mean, Ray, the guy who founded this Creo thing, he's built a good team. You give them the EDC screenshots, and they'll create the source template for you.
Yeah.
And you can even upload things. Let's say you wanted to put a note to file in there, but you wrote it by hand because the staff forgot you're using eSource. Well, you can just scan that thing and upload it into Creo. So it's I like the flexibility of Creo. And then for me as a business owner, I like the fact that it has a built-in CTMS. So you know exactly what you're owed.
Yes.
And all those things. So they do all that for you, which is really cool. And I heard that they're rolling out a e-regulatory, but we haven't used that yet.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the automated text reminders that it'll send your patients, and we're now using their reloadable Visa card system to make our patient stipends, which is ridiculously convenient. And
yeah, you guys are using all the stuff we're not, so that's cool.
Yeah, I love it. I guess you're going the eSource route, and we're using the other side of things.
Yeah, but
we should compare notes for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that they offer that whole end-to-end spectrum of that. So that's cool. I like what those guys are doing. I like Ray a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And it's got a super robust recruitment module in it as well, where you can load in your whole patient database and basically do ICD-10 pulls, and then you can send automated text messages to all the patients that come out of that pull.
Wow.
So it's very cool and sophisticated. For us, the trick, is just figuring the damn thing out well enough to use it the way it's supposed to be used. I mean, these systems are great, but if the more you use them, the better they are, if that makes sense. So the more you put in, the better result it gives you. It's just finding the time and processes in which to do that. So I'm on board with you with Creo. So, well, very cool. Again, I want to I want to thank you, and I appreciate you coming on. Any other words of wisdom before we go?
Words of wisdom. I mean, be a generalist, get more, don't settle. I guess, and there's like a philosophical argument that I see a lot amongst site owners, where it's like, should I focus on this or should I try to do more? And I think both can work. I mean, I know some sites that are wanting to get into virtual trials and wanting to become CROs. And then I know other sites that just want to specialize in what they do. And we've seen both models, have extremely successful outcomes. So it really is going back to what we said earlier, like just doing it. Like, enough of the debating of what you should do. I mean, everybody has a preference, so go with your preference. There's a reason why you feel more comfortable doing something than something else, so maybe just go with that. That's kind of worked for me throughout my career. I'm starting to get more strategic now, but I'm pretty sure if I were still to have impulsive decisions, that I would still have somewhat successful outcomes. Maybe the same, if not better, than if I overanalyzed something. So
Right.
that's, I guess, a word of wisdom. But I'm seeing a lot of that on LinkedIn, like people debating about this kind of stuff. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Yep, agree. So where can people find you online, as if they don't already know? Anywhere you want to
LinkedIn. LinkedIn's good. I've been growing my Instagram, Dan Sfera. I've been playing around with TikTok, but not enough. And YouTube and the podcast. Basically, anywhere you're comfortable, I'm probably there. Unless it's like, one of those dating apps. I'm happily married now.
All right. Don't look for Dan on Tinder. Otherwise,
I'm not on there. I didn't even know what it was called. So there you go.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sure your wife's listening, and she'll be very proud that you said that.
Yep.
I'll link to all those places in the show notes. And again, thank you so much, Dan, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Brad.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Please check us out at notetofilepodcast.com for show notes, all episodes, as well as full episode transcripts. Once again, thanks for listening.